Ireland, the low-tax European home of Apple, Facebook, and Google, will raise its corporate tax to 15%, joining a global agreement. Wow. This is probably one of the biggest, I mean, outside from the debt ceiling news from yesterday, this is potentially huge. This has huge ramifications. Ireland has agreed to set 15% corporate tax rate for large multinational companies. Ireland has been the low tax European headquarters for tech giants, including Apple, Google, and Facebook. Ireland said on Thursday it would give up its 12.5% rate for large firms. So it's increasing. Ireland said a joint national agreement set the minimum corporate tax to 15%. The country dropped its opposition to an overhaul of global corporate tax rules, agreeing to give up its 12.5% tax for large multinationals with revenues in excess of 750 million euros or $865 million. Ireland, the low-tax European headquarters for tech giants, including Apple, Google, Facebook, declined to sign up to the initial deal in July, objecting to a proposed rate of at least 15%. An updated text this week dropped the at least, clearing the way for ministers to do what successive governments said that they would never contemplate, giving up the low tax rate that has helped win Ireland investments and jobs for decades. Joining this agreement is an important decision for the next stage of Ireland's industrial policy, a decision that will ensure that Ireland is part of the solution. This is a difficult and complex decision, but I believe it is the right one. All but a handful of the 140 countries involved signed up to the July deal, brokered by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD. That rolls off the tongue. That marked the first rewriting of the international tax rules in a generation. The holdouts, which include fellow EU members Estonia and Hungary, can't block the proposed changes. The 140 negotiating countries are due to meet on Friday to finalize the deal. The U.S. Treasury, which had pressed Ireland to support the global minimum tax, hailed Dublin's decision as putting the world on a path towards a generational achievement to ensure corporations pay their fair share of taxes. If Ireland had maintained its lower rate, multinationals that book profits there could be forced to pay the additional tax elsewhere under the proposals. The government said it had received assurances from the European Commission that Ireland could maintain the 12.5% rate for firms with annual turnover below 750 million euros or $867 million and keep tax incentives for research and development. The Commission also promised it would stick faithfully to the OECD agreement and not seek a higher rate among member states. So that is quite a bit there. So having the minimum corporate tax rate be 15% does start to change the landscape for these giant companies that, like Apple, has been enjoying this since I think the late 70s, early 80s, when they went and are they incorporated out of, I forget if they're incorporated out of Ireland. I forget how I've watched the documentary on this, but I don't quite remember the exact details of it. But yeah, it basically has enabled them to, skirt a whole lot of taxes along the way and create this amazing amount of wealth, a pool of money for especially for Apple, but for Google and Facebook and others. I've recently watched the John DeLorean documentary where he went to Ireland specifically because of the taxes back in the 80s, right? Because he wanted to be able, they were willing to like help him pay for the building and for the manufacture of the car and all that stuff. So Ireland has done a lot of things to keep the money flowing into their country, and I'm sure it was hard to succumb to said pressure of like, hey, we need to do something about this. And with they said about 140 countries, that means that there's, I don't know, was there like 180 countries in the world? So there's some countries that that might be the next become the next Ireland, as they are become the become holdouts on said agreement. But I think that there needs to be something to that level, so that there's no advantage. We need to take away that advantage of like just stashing money, especially when companies like Google, who don't really make, or there's 190 countries. Thank you, Danny. I appreciate that. I thought it was, yeah, I just thought it was like closer to 180, but yeah, probably about 100, 190 or so. So we need to make sure that they're paying their fair share, and that they, especially companies like that are in tech that aren't producing a hardware product, they, can expand their wealth so rapidly, because it's servers and it's bandwidth, and it's not necessarily they have to, build the iPhone and all that stuff. It just creates such a fast-paced funnel of wealth to them, and then to not have, to be able to just skirt it through a country in, Western Europe, is just always been mind-boggling to me, and I think overlooked by a lot of people. But we'll see how this plays out as far as the pricing of things going forward. Is Apple going to end up raising their prices going forward, or are they just going to take a little less profit off the table?